And start recording as well. Well, I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. I hope you guys enjoyed the snow. I know I did. I hope it's not the last snow of the year. I definitely, got my fingers crossed for nice, 10 inches, 12 inches of snow. But we'll see. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Most of you guys probably realized or noticed that I finally got around to shuffling all of your grades over from Google Classroom into PowerSchool. If I'm not mistaken, I think progress reports are going out Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. But really, at the end of the day, your most accurate grade will be in PowerSchool. Okay. I did put in quite a few zeros. Now, that's not to say that, you can't make up those assignments over this next week and get those changed, but I need those sooner rather than later. As I mentioned in the very, very beginning of the semester, I grade things twice, right when they're first turned in, and then I'll grade again right before progress reports. And once that progress report week is over with, I don't go back, right? Because we got to move forward. And I'll describe a little bit more of that here in a second. So let's go ahead and take a look at our checklist for the week. We had a 2-hour delay. So I'm actually going to be kind of shifting some things around. I was going to talk to you guys a little bit about cellular respiration today, but I'm going to do that tomorrow instead. I'm going to quickly go over your quiz from Friday. You had a quiz on photosynthesis, right? Your quiz on photosynthesis was Friday. I know some of you guys have still yet to complete it, but I'll address that here shortly. And then I want to give you guys some time to make up some work. Some of you guys need to desperately get caught up on some of your missing assignments and get those zeros turned back around. And you can see, what the week has in store for us later on. We're going to be talking about cellular respiration. You'll continue working on your Unit 3 notes with the Unit 3 PowerPoint, as well as the lecture videos that I've put together. And then hopefully finishing watching all of those lecture videos by Wednesday. So that way on Thursday, we can start kind of reviewing for your respiration quiz on Friday. And there's also a video on fermented foods. I think it's wonderful. Talks a lot about our evolutionary history as a species and, what in the heck, how do people get around to, eating fermented foods? Like if you think about what cheese is or sauerkraut or kimchi or beer, it's like rotten food that, how did we discover those tastes? How do we discover those flavors? And, who were the first humans that were crazy enough to eat those things? All right, so we'll talk about that on Thursday. It's a really, really awesome video. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go over the quiz on photosynthesis. And to make it fair, I know some of you guys had already taken the quiz. Some of you guys still need to take it. So what I decided to do is for those of you guys that took the quiz on time, right, for those of you that have already taken the quiz, I'm also going to allow you to retake the quiz for a higher score. So as soon as I'm done going over this, I will post in Google Classroom a photosynthesis quiz retake. So if you took the quiz the first time and it didn't go so well for you, maybe you made a 40 or 50, you can hang out with me right now. I'm going to go over the quiz, and as soon as I'm done, you can go and retake the quiz for a higher score. So if you made a 40 or 50 the first time and you make a 100 on the retake, that's what I put in the grade book. I put 100 in the grade book for you. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these questions. I'm going to go over these quickly. Consumes carbohydrates produced by another. Well, this is a term that's used to describe consumers, and another scientific term for consumer is a heterotroph. And this is addressed in your PowerPoint, right? So if these questions were confusing to you, it's because you're not looking at the PowerPoints and not completing your notes or watching the lecture videos. Capable of producing carbohydrates for its own metabolic needs. Well, this is like an organism that can produce its own food, like a producer, like a plant. And the scientific name for that is autotroph. Auto means self, and troph is talking about energy. So this organism can provide energy for itself through photosynthesis. Compounds that experience change during a reaction. They're required to start the chemical reaction. These are our reactants. Reactants do the reaction, so reactants are what you start with. And the compounds that are formed during or after a chemical reaction, those are your products, right? So reactants react to produce products. The green pigment responsible for absorbing sunlight. Plants are green because they have chloroplasts, and inside of their chloroplasts is a light-absorbing pigment known as chlorophyll. Chlorophyll absorbs every color except for green. That's why green is reflected back at your eyes. In fact, plants really don't like green light at all. If you tried to grow a plant inside with just a green light bulb, the plant would more than likely not be able to photosynthesize enough sugars and might eventually die, right? Plants actually like red and blue lights more than green for sure. A chemical reaction that forms glucose in the, where's the rest of the question? In the chloroplast, okay? And that would be photosynthesis, okay? Both oxygen and glucose are what? Well, both oxygen and glucose are products of photosynthesis, right? Plants produce glucose and they produce oxygen as a result of photosynthesis. Water, carbon dioxide, and light, well, these are the reactants. These are the three things that plants need as reactants to start photosynthesis. Plants can absorb the water in the roots, absorb the carbon dioxide through small openings in the bottom of the leaf known as stoma, or many of them will be stomata, and then obviously absorb light with the chloroplast to provide the energy needed for photosynthesis to occur. So these are the reactants. This is what we need to get started. What part of the plant would contain the most chloroplasts? Well, chloroplasts are the tiny little organelles that allow plants to photosynthesize sunlight into sugars, right? And so what part of the plant is probably most responsible for photosynthesis? What part of the plant is most responsible for absorbing sunlight energy? That's definitely going to be the leaf, right? So our leaves are like little plant solar panels, right? And they contain thousands of chloroplasts to absorb sunlight so they can perform photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide and oxygen can enter and exit a leaf through what? Well, these tiny little openings are known as stomata. Enzymes are, remember, proteins that just simply catalyze reactions. Thylakoids are these little like pigment pancakes inside of the chloroplast, right? So inside of the chloroplast, you have these little pancake looking things, and that's where the chlorophyll is trapped. The chlorophyll is kind of like stuck to the outside of the thylakoids. And then chlorophyll, again, is that light trapping pigment that would be embedded inside of the thylakoid. And so the stomata are those small openings. If and when we return to class, I'll actually show you guys how to remove cells from plant leaves, and we'll actually look at the stomata under a microscope. What factors can affect the rate of photosynthesis, right? So rate, just think about speed, right? So what factors can affect the speed of photosynthesis or the productivity of photosynthesis? Well, first and foremost, the reactants, right? Plants need water, carbon dioxide, and light, right? But temperature also plays a part. We talked about this last week. Plants generally like warmer temperatures. They don't like to be really hot. They don't like to be really cold. They usually like that nice warm. Think about subtropical and tropical climates, right? Nice and warm, plenty of light, plenty of carbon dioxide, and water for the plants. If a plant cell or chloroplast gets too hot or too cold, why does the rate of photosynthesis change? Well, photosynthesis is a chemical reaction, and like all chemical reactions that take place in our bodies, call those metabolism, right? Metabolic reactions, they're all going to be catalyzed by enzymes, right? So even photosynthesis relies on enzymes to speed up those reactions to allow the plant to make the sugar and the oxygen in the presence of sunlight with carbon dioxide and water. And so enzymes are important. So if the plant gets too cold, or too hot, important enzymes can become denatured. And denatured simply means they change their shapes, they're not going to function. For example, my wife and I accidentally left one of our houseplants outside their night. And this particular plant does not like cool weather. And some of the leaves died, right? So the leaves got so cold that those enzymes became denatured, and that plant started to experience something known as necrosis, right? And necrosis means like, tissue death, right? So the best answer here is going to be important enzymes. And plants can get too hot too. Like let's say in the summertime, you go into a store and you buy a plant and you accidentally left it in your car, right? In a hot parking lot, like you're more or less going to cook that plant, right? You're going to denature the enzymes and the plant's going to die. Which term could be used to describe organisms that use photosynthesis, right? Well, we don't use photosynthesis, right? We have to go we have to go eat our food. We have to go consume something. Plants can use photosynthesis so they can produce their own food. So we can call them producers, or a more scientific, accurate description would be an autotroph, meaning self-feeding. If you wanted to be really specific, plants are photoautotrophic, right? So they use light, photo, to feed themselves. Now, there are other producers out there at the bottom of the ocean. There are small bacteria that can actually produce sugar from energy in their environments, and we call them chemoautotrophs because they use chemical energy. You find them in the hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. It's really neat. And we'll look at those later on. What organelle performs photosynthesis? This is where it gets a little tricky. It's the chloroplast. The chloroplast contains the chlorophyll, right? So the chloroplast is like the little baby organ that contains the light-trapping pigment chlorophyll. So I think chlorophyll fills the chloroplast, right? So the chloroplast is the organelle, and the chlorophyll is the little protein pigment inside of the chloroplast that allows it to absorb sunlight. Which of the equations below represent photosynthesis? Well, really at the end of the day, all these smaller numbers, you're not really all that important. You just need to think, okay, what do plants need to get started? Well, I know that plants need water and carbon dioxide, right? And so if I look over here, these are all chemical equations. I need to find water and carbon dioxide for my starting point, right? And so I can see that right here. Right, we got 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water. Either way, I know this is what I'm starting with. We call this side of the chemical equation the reactants, right? And I know that plants produce glucose and oxygen, right? And so that's in the right spot for the products of the chemical equation. Photosynthesis takes energy from solar radiation, and what does it do? Well, it stores this chemical energy in a sugar, and we know that sugars are called carbohydrates. So plants use photosynthesis to convert solar energy, solar radiation, into the chemical energy found in the chemical bonds inside of a sugar. So when you eat food, right, and you eat carbohydrates, your body is actually breaking down those chemical bonds, releasing that chemical energy. Which of the answer choices could be considered a waste product of photosynthesis? So what is something that plants make that they're not really going to hold on to and they're going to release into the environment? And that's going to be oxygen, right? The air that we breathe is produced through photosynthesis, right? So plants and algae and photosynthetic bacteria over the last couple 100 million years have been producing the oxygen that we find in our atmosphere. Believe it or not, before photosynthesis, there was no oxygen in our atmosphere here on Earth. Plants use photosynthesis to produce glucose. The glucose molecules can be combined to form large polysaccharides. What polysaccharide is formed for short-term energy storage for plants? Well, plants are going to be busy, right, during like the summer and all that, growing, photosynthesizing sugars. But plants also need a way of storing energy for the short term. And they do this with starch, right? So if you think about a potato plant, all the leaves are above ground, photosynthesizing sugars, and then the potato plant sends the extra sugars down into the tuber, right, into the starchy potato, right? And the potato swells as it accumulates more and more starch. A plant is placed in a sealed jar. Light and water are supplied to the plant while carbon dioxide is removed. What answer best describes what will happen? Well, remember, plants need sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. So if I'm giving the plant only 2 of the 3 things it needs, it's probably not going to be able to perform photosynthesis. So I think the best answer would be the rate of photosynthesis will decrease because the plant needs all 3, water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide. If you take one of those away, you're going to take away the plant's ability to perform photosynthesis. What wavelength or color of light is not absorbed well by plants, by chlorophyll? Well, again, what color are most plants? And that's going to be green. So plants love all colors except for green. It's why they reflect it back at our eyes. Okay, so as I had mentioned before, for those of you that did take the quiz and got it completed on time, you're going to have the option to take a retake for this quiz. So if you didn't do well the first time and you want to try to get a higher score, I'll be posting that here in just a second. In fact, I will do it right now. So let's go to classwork and it's going to go create. I'll create an assignment and we'll call it retake. Whoa, that's not how you spell that. Retake, and that was quiz 3.1, right, on photosynthesis, right? And so now you guys are getting a little tour of how this is done. Make sure that I click on the right one. And I'll put it underneath our Unit 3 cell metabolism. I'll make it due by, what is today? Today's Monday. Okay, this is due by tonight. And assign. So we just went over it. So if you want to go and try to take the quiz again for a higher score, you can. But that opportunity is only available to those of you that already took the quiz. If you still haven't taken a quiz or any missing assignments, you need to be doing that today, right? Because time is running out. Please get caught up. If you have any questions about anything, please, 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 please send me an email or a remind. Now, if you are all caught up, right, and maybe you did so well on the first quiz, you don't even need to take a retake. then today would be a great day to just go ahead and knock out your vocabulary on cellular respiration. And if you do want to get ahead this week, right, the biggest thing you can do to prepare yourself, right, for any of the quizzes and exams, or to make sure that you're watching these lecture videos, right? I tried to make them nice and short. I tried to break them up into little chunks so you can watch, like one a day or something like that. But guys, you're not going to do all that well in this class if you're not watching these videos, okay? All right, well, that's all I have for you guys. If you haven't taken the quiz, do that. If you did take the quiz and you want to try the retake, you can go ahead and do that as well. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow at our normal time, hopefully. All righty. Go ahead and